Hey everybody, come on in here, grab your beverage. Mine will be a Zola coconut water espresso. No, they don't pay me to do this, but they really should. As soon as we get enough people in here, I'm going to give you a little whiteboard talk on the topic of the day, the most important topic in the world right now, it seems, which is the president's mental fitness for the job. Are you ready for this? All right, I think we got enough people. I'm going to jump right in. But before I do, if you have your beverage, grab it now. Oh, you all know the simultaneous sipping is the best. All right, let's get right to it. There is a belief out there, created by the anti-Trump world, that the president is mentally unfit in some variety of vague ways that might have to do with his capacity or actually being crazy. Let's look at that argument, and then we're going to look at the counter argument, and you make up your mind. And yes, I did put on my TV shirt just for this moment. So we're going to start with all the pro argument. So this would be the argument that says the president is mentally unfit. You've seen it all in the news. I won't go into too much detail. We'll just hit all the notes, right? There is the testimony of Dr. Bandy Lee, who apparently, it was reported, talked to Congress and said that the president is mentally unfit and should be removed. We learned today, thanks to Dr. Drew and his radio interview of Dr. Bandy, that she didn't actually say anything like that. What she said was she's an expert on violence in society, and although I don't fully understand her argument, it had something to do with the president's actions causing other people to potentially be more violent, and that was her concern. She does not have an opinion about the actual president's mental fitness. You can see that interview by going to my Twitter feed, and you'll see the link to Dr. Drew's interview. It's jaw-dropping. I mean, it's worth 20 minutes. It really is. Your whole worldview will change when you listen to that thing. It's probably the best interview of the year on any topic. Of course, there are also hundreds of mental health experts who got together and said the president is crazy. We'll talk about that in a minute. They say he's a narcissist. They say his tweets are crazy. His policies are crazy. What about that time he picked up a water bottle with both hands and then he used one hand to drink? Wasn't that a sign of some kind of neurological problem? There was the one time he slurred his speech. One time. There was his lower vocabulary. People say, hey, he used to have a bigger vocabulary. There's the fact he repeats himself a lot. He acts like a child, according to the Fire and Fury book. There are print interviews in which people say, my God, when you read the interview he did in print, it looks like there's something wrong with his brain. And he doesn't seem to master the policy details, and he watches too much cable news. Now, if you were to look at all of these things together, you might say, as much of the public did, holy cow, that's a lot of smoke. And where there's that much smoke, there must be some fire. But here's the other thing it could be, and what it usually is, in these situations anyway. It could be that once you got it in your head that there might be some kind of mental problem, everything started to look that way. That's the normal way our brains work. Once we've decided that something is true, all information seems to support it. So there are two possibilities for all of these observed phenomenon. One is that the president is crazy. The other is that this is very normal confirmation bias created by the enemies of the president, reported by the news because they have to fill up time. So let's talk about the argument against this being a reflection of truth and just see if that looks more compelling to you than the notion that the president is literally and actually crazy in some dangerous way. All right. The con argument goes like this. Did anybody watch the meeting today that was televised about DACA? It would be really hard to watch the president fully control that room, completely acting like a boss, coherent, flexible, listening to the other side, hitting every note that a leader should hit with humor, etc. So why is it that when we see him in public, whether it's a rally where he's just nailing it, or he's giving an interview, or like this DACA meeting, is it possible that every time we see him in public, and these are things that are scheduled, ahead of time, it's not like, he waited and until he was not crazy and then he went on camera. These things are hitting him all the time, according to a schedule he doesn't control. What are the odds that you've never seen him actually act crazy? You didn't see him slur any more speech. Nothing. So let's take the slurred speech. Have you ever had a friend, you're just talking to your friend, and they just slur a normal word and they haven't been drinking? Let me ask you that here. Have you ever yourself simply just slurred some words, or heard somebody else slur some words, and it meant absolutely nothing? They were tired. Sometimes if I'm thinking of two different words and I pick one, the other one kind of bleeds over and I slur it because it's a combination of two words that shouldn't go together. Or it was his dentures, or he was sucking on a lozenge, or something else. If you see a lot of this, you need to worry. If you see it once, that's just like everybody, right? Let's take the water bottle. He famously picked up a water bottle with two hands and drank it like that. Now, if you can't imagine any other reason that somebody would do that, your mind would go to where it's been primed. And it's been primed to think, hey, there might be some problem here. And sure enough, when you see him pick up that bottle, you say, wait, that's not normal water bottle manipulation. That's something different. Maybe it means something. Well, I'm not going to speculate what it was, why he used two hands instead of one. I don't think it was important, but I would tell you that if you can't imagine why there would be another reason, that might be a failure of imagination as opposed to a problem with the president. Let me give you an example. This is not speculating what it was, just an example of how you could fail to imagine something else. Right before he picked up the water bottle, he was looking for the water and had commented that he doesn't seem to have any water. Then when it was presented to him, or he found it, I think, this is just my best guess, that he was thinking about doing a gag. He sometimes does water bottle gags. He does physical humor. I think he picked it up with the thought of doing a callback to the moment before when he couldn't find it and acting like, oh, finally I found some water, or some other joke. And it looks like he bailed out on the joke because he really couldn't think of a good place to take it. So to me, it looks like he used two hands, was thinking about making a physical joke, just changed his mind, took a sip of water. Crazy? No, just somebody who couldn't think of a joke on the moment. There's also the issue that half of our presidents have been mentally ill in one way or another. And indeed, if you were to grab whoever's the closest person to you, like whoever that is, you're in the office, you're at home, whoever's the physically closest person to you, ask yourself, do they have any mental problems that would be problematic to be a president? And the answer is probably. Your friend is probably, or your spouse, or whoever is close to you, has probably been depressed at least once, has probably had an anger issue. Maybe they had some drinks. Maybe they drank too much. It's a very long list of things you wouldn't want in a president. And in fact, the list is so long that you really can't even get a president who doesn't have that stuff, nor have we probably ever accomplished that. Most of our presidents have a little something going on. You could get a President Clinton who's got a sex addiction, or Kennedy too, and you could go right down the list. They're either on some kind of medication, they drink too much, they've been depressed, one thing or another. So it's dangerous to say there's something a little bit different about this person, he can't be president. That isn't really the standard. The standard is, can they do their job? Are they better than the other choices? You also have to take context. This attack on President Trump, that he's literally crazy, is a standard attack against Republicans. Now, it's not every single Republican, but so many of them that you have to see the pattern. All right, they did it with Goldwater, they did it with Reagan. It's just the normal thing that you do with Republicans. Hey, they're crazy. All right. Then you also have to explain, if he's so mentally unfit for the job, how could it be that he's had such a successful first year? How did he get the nomination? How did he win? How did he do all these things so successfully? And this is what's causing what I call the cognitive death spiral that we're seeing right now from the anti-Trumpers. And it went like this. He is definitely not going to get nominated. Okay, he got nominated. I didn't see that coming. There's no way he's going to win. Well, he won. Okay. Well, there's no way he's going to last a year. Okay, the year's up. He's still there. But the economy is definitely going to crash. Okay, the economy is better than it's ever been. But still, when you're at the top of the list, you can still write it off. You can say, all right, I missed one, but I'm right on most things, but I missed one, okay? But as this list grows, and you're wrong, he didn't start a nuclear war. He wasn't ineffective, at least by Republican standards. He got what they want. Your death spiral, your cognitive death spiral, starts with things that you can kind of explain away, all right? You can explain away why you won by saying, well, it was probably Russia, or maybe it was Comey, or maybe they're more racist than we thought. So you can explain away the first few. All right? This is like a low wind situation. But the more it happens, and you are just wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and wrong, and wrong, you reach this cognitive death spiral where there's only two things that can happen at the bottom. One, you escape the Trump derangement syndrome bubble, as we noticed David Brooks did in his piece in the New York Times today. You can see a link to that in my Twitter feed as well, in which he described that the anti-Trumpers are becoming dumber, in his words, because they're just not even making sense anymore. It's just so completely obvious that he is getting things done that Republicans wanted. It's impossible to hold the frame in your mind that he's anything like what they thought in the beginning. All right? But there's another possibility. The other possibility is if you don't get out of the Trump derangement syndrome bubble and see it for what it was, you get crazier. And it can be actually, I think, a mental health problem. And those people are desperate for some explanation of why they could still be right despite being wrong about everything. And so what they cling to is, well, I was wrong about 25 things in a row. All 25. I missed 25 things in a row. But I'm definitely going to get this one right. He's crazy. All right. So you're seeing the result of a cognitive death spiral. And we're at the crazy phase at the bottom. And so we're talking about, if you're just joining us, why that is not the best argument. Now let's talk about his lower vocabulary compared to old interviews that we've seen, and the fact that he repeats himself. Do you know who's not worried about that? I'll tell you who's not worried about that. Cognitive scientists. If you talk to a cognitive scientist or a linguistic expert, let's say George Lakoff or Robert Cialdini, famous cognitive scientist and expert on persuasion, when they look at his simple language, they see somebody who knows how to communicate in a way that the listener wants it, in a way that it works. We notice that the president changes his style of communication for each situation. He talks to children like a grandfather. He talks to enemies like he's the toughest guy in the world. He talks to, the people he likes like they're his best friends. And he talks in simple language because that's what the public wants, needs, and understands. All right? So the fact that he's speaking in absolutely the most effective speaking style is the opposite of being crazy. It means somebody knows how to change their form of speaking to fit the situation. Likewise with his tweets, his crazy tweets. Those crazy tweets, if you were to ask a cognitive scientist, if you were to ask a linguistic expert, they will tell you, even if they don't like his policies, and many of them don't, they're going to tell you, yes, but those tweets are really, really effective. Okay, that's what I've been telling you for a couple of years, based on just my own training as a hypnotist and a trained persuader, that what people see as a little bit crazy and dangerous and, oh my God, you can't say I've got a bigger nuclear button, you might cause a war. And I've been saying from the beginning that he has much more control and technique and engineering in these tweets than is obvious to people who are not trained in this form of communication. He's the best you've ever seen at this, and experts will agree. Even if they don't like the policies, they'll agree that his communication is insanely effective. So if he's insane, he's insanely effective. All right. Some people will say there must be something wrong with him because he refuses or he's unable, they say, but that's really their interpretation. What we know is that he doesn't master the policy details. You've watched him not master the policy details all the way through the nomination, the election, and now his first year of being president. What does that tell you? Well, it could tell you he's crazy. That's what it tells his haters. You know what it tells me? He just came off of one of the most effective first years a president's ever had. You might not like what he did if you're not Republican, you're not leaning in that direction, but you can't argue that these are the things he promised and that he did follow through and got a ton of stuff done. All right? So the way I interpret this is that he's someone who knows the difference between, wait for it, he knows the difference between details that don't matter and things that do. All right? When he says the wall, the wall, the wall, the wall, the wall, it's because he knows that it matters. It matters to our psychology. It matters to how potential illegal immigrants are thinking about coming into the country. It matters because it's visual. It focuses us. It matters on all kinds of levels. So when he says the wall, the wall, the wall, but he can't, for example, explain the details of comprehensive immigration, does it matter? He knew the only thing that mattered. All right, and they say he watches too much cable news. Now, think about that. I watch cable news pretty much all day, meaning it's on and off, and I'm checking in all the time. The reason I do that is because I do this. So I tweet, I do periscopes on the topic of President Trump and politics. You can't really do that effectively unless you've seen both sides, and the president watches CNN as well as Fox News. He gets both sides, but he's seeing it the way the public is seeing it. He's seeing lots of different people until he can figure out what's the pattern, what do people feel about it, what's the thing they want to talk about. What thing is bubbling up from all this noise? What things are bubbling up to be important? He's surfing this. He's standing there with a wave, with his surfboard on the beach, and he's watching the waves form. He paddles out, and he's sitting there waiting for a wave. All right. When he's watching TV, and really watching really means it's just on during the day, and he's checking in and out. When he's doing that, He's surfing the zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is sort of the way the public feels, even if they're not talking about it. He's looking for the feel. He's looking for the mood of the country. He's looking for the moment. He's looking for the wave. And when he catches the wave, it turns into a tweet. All right? All that TV watching is not about entertainment, although I'm sure it's entertaining in its own way. It's necessary for someone who wants to stay plugged in to the mood of the ordinary people. and as well as being plugged into what the pundits are saying so he can prepare his responses to them. All right. Critics say, and this came out from the Fire and Fury book, that the president acts like a child. He acts like a child, they say. Specifically, Michael Wolff says that he's quoting people on the inside in the White House who say the president acts like a child. Now, I'm going to credit Greg Gutfeld for this observation. He said this on The Five on Fox News. He said, and I'll paraphrase a little bit, if you took any adult male who has a good sense of humor and you asked people to describe him, how many people would say he's like a child? A lot, right? Being like a child usually means that you don't have patience for idiots. So you're not going to listen to all their details. Once you know what's important and what isn't, you don't really need to listen to the rest of it. And so he probably has a low attention span for bad advice, idiots, things he already knows, things that don't matter. And he's brutal about his time management. So he probably just gets up and walks away, or some version of that, when he's heard as much as he needs to hear. Very childlike, right? But in his mind, there's a whole different thing going on, which is, I know what I need to know. All right? If he makes a joke, if he changes the subject, if he decides to kid around, that can look very childlike, but it also is part of what binds him to people. It's part of why people connect with him. None of this is accidental. All right. He repeats himself. I talked about that. Repeating is good persuasion. It also keeps you focused. But he's also 70. And we can't discount the fact that a 70-year-old is going to repeat himself a little bit more than a 24-year-old. It's just the way it works, right? 71, yeah. Yeah, we all repeat ourselves. I repeat myself on Periscope all the time. I'm doing it right now. So some amount of repetition is just good. A little extra makes you probably a little bit more persuasive, even if it's bothering people who are hearing it. And they're saying, I've heard that 15 times so far. Well, if you hear it 20 times, it is more persuasive. You can't change the math of it. You can't change the science. Repetition is persuasion. But he's also 71, and he might repeat himself a little bit more than usual, like every 71-year-old, right? Nothing necessarily to work about. Somebody just said I should take a drink again, and that's good persuasion. It's time for a midterm Periscope simultaneous sip. Grab your beverage. Let's do this again. Put your beverage down. I'd like you all to grab it with two hands, like a president. Two-hand grab, bring it up, release the left hand. Good stuff. All right. Now, there's the Fire and Fury book that we haven't talked about specifically, but I think that's been so thoroughly discredited at this point, there's not much more to say about it. I will say, however, that I think the Fire and Fury book, which its author, Michael Wolff, believed might be the thing that would bring down the presidency, might be the thing that deflated the Trump derangement mass hysteria bubble more than anything else. And the reason is, and I think David Brooks probably felt this. He didn't say it, so I'm speculating, and it's always dangerous to imagine what other people are thinking. But I speculate that David Brooks and a number of others have had this same cognitive experience, which is that they thought they were on the team that had a good handle on President Trump, and they all agreed that he was crazy and incompetent, even though the evidence was mounting up that they were wrong. When the Fire and Fury book came out, it was so obviously fake news, at least many parts of it that were debunked, and so obviously just not true. For example, the claim that 100% of the people in the White House think the president is mentally incompetent. Geraldo pointed this out first on Fox News. There is no chance that that's true, right? There's some things you can hear and say, well, It's unlikely, but it's possible. That's not true. There's not even the slightest chance that everyone in the White House thinks he's mentally unfit for the job. There's no chance. So by being so far over the top in this book that also got so much attention and was actually promoted by the legitimate media, New York Times, Maggie Haberman said, well, it may not be accurate in a tweet, but it is notionally, I think she said notionally accurate or notionally correct. And when you start hearing stuff like that, notionally correct, it's hard to be in that team and feel good about yourself. So I think the Fire and Fury book, ironically, worked exactly opposite of the way it was intended because it was an overreach. And it was such a big overreach that it did a good job of what the author wanted, which is selling a lot of books. But I think it popped, or at least deflated somewhat, the Trump hysteria bubble. And we're starting to see a little of that today. Somebody came in late to say something quite off point. All right, so does anybody have any questions about any of this? I'm going to take a sip of my delicious beverage while I look at your questions. All right. Now, you also heard the president, if you watched the DACA meeting that was televised, which was, by the way, brilliant that the president televised this, because he assumed correctly that he would control the room in a very positive, bipartisan, in-charge kind of a way while still listening and getting all the input. That's what we saw. But here's, if you want to see the future a little bit, I've already predicted this, but I'll double down on it. In order for the Democrats to win, they have to be able to tell their voters that they did not approve the wall. In order for Trump to win and for Republicans to do well in 2018, they need to say the opposite, that the wall was approved and it's already being built. How can you have bipartisan support when you want opposite things? No wall versus wall. And you heard the president talking about the wall in a way that suggests exactly where that will be. And where that will be is apparently the biggest problems with border security are places where there's already a wall. And the reason there's already a wall there is that the places that are the main immigration problems have been known for a long time. So somebody put a wall there to try to stop it, but the wall wasn't good enough. People climbed over the wall, apparently, or went around it. So the president's talking about how building a wall and repairing an existing wall are all part of the same process. Right? Do you see it yet? If what happens is the first part of the approved wall is replacing the bad parts of the existing wall, the Democrats can say, we did not approve any wall, we only approved upgrades where there are already walls. Well, the president can say, and truthfully, they approved the wall, here's a picture of it. This is the prototype. You saw the prototype, now it's on the border. Now it's a wall. Used to be a bad wall, now it's a good wall. All right? So the conditions for both Democrats and Republicans to say that they both got what they needed to get are all in place. And you saw, I think that they know that because they seem to be playing very nicely with each other. So you're going to see that come through. All right. So that's what I want to talk about today. I've been invited to be on Dr. Drew's radio show today at 2:05 Pacific time, so don't get that confused with Eastern time, on KABC Radio. So if you have a way to listen to that, listen to me, and I'll be talking about much of the same stuff. All right, that's all for now.